right, welcome to 6G Agenda. I'm your host, Andrew. Here again, alone doing the book club today. And it is a book club Monday. As always, we are doing it live on YouTube. Thanks for joining me. For anybody that's here, Cake in a Cup, what's up? How you doing? Welcome. Doing a little back-to-back today. We just did an episode that will be out here this week. So you'll be looking forward to that. But otherwise, we're going to get into the secret teachings of all ages. Again, we have the sun, a universal deity, is the chapter that we're doing today. It's going to be great. The last one was about Isis, which would be the moon. The sun is the next one, the universal deity, aka Osiris. So it's going to be a good time. So we're going to kind of break down, firstly, Manly P. Hall, kind of like, brief kind of what he talks about. There's plenty of seminars if you want to listen to him of how he breaks down the evolution of the worship of the sun. There's many, almost every pagan religion breaks down to it. So it's pretty all encompassing. It's not like a one, there's everywhere you look, it's there. He even points out that in every chapel and every main like cathedral, you'll find some kind of sun emblem somewhere, which I find pretty funny because most of Jesus's murals, you'll see he's got like the sun in the back of his head. I think something to that. He's not wrong when it comes to that. So, hey, things to think about. All right, so let's get it going. We're going to get into what I got here for some notes that from his seminars I listened to. Let's get into an overview here. Hall begins most of his stuff by asserting that sun worship is one of the oldest and most widespread forms of religious expression. He kind of points out, whenever I was listening to it, he talks about how in the beginning of man couldn't see at night. And so at night, he would be, huddled up in his caves or his huts and waiting on the day to come back whenever the sun's back. And, these creepy, crawly, freaky, creatures, weird creatures weren't going to be out there attacking them or doing whatever, right? And so they just kind of knew intuitively that the sun is important. It's kind of what he was saying. And as time goes on, it became a deity and something that they worship. In the beginning, it was something as simple as they understood that it saved them and brought them warmth, light, life, and it protected them. And it was there. It would go away and come every day. So this death and resurrection occurs every day, which kind of why the main mystery schools, everything is all about the initiation rites are always about death and rebirth. And it's always related to the sun in some way. So anyway, before recorded history, the sun was being looked at this way. That's what he was saying. And the sun's life-giving light and warmth made it naturally revered as a symbolic symbol of divine power and spiritual illumination. As time went on, that's what it represented. So there's something called primordial worship, which all ancient cultures worship the sun or a solar god, seeing it as a source of life, growth, or cosmic order. But as time went on, gods of many pantheons are identified, like Greek, Egyptian, Norse, and Mesoamerican, are all identified as solar deities or closely associated with the sunlight's life force. And so you kind of do see it permeate. This is the one world kind of religion that just comes out everywhere. Osiris, son of Ham, whatever you want to call him. That's all connected with him. This Luciferian ideology, if you call it. So Hall explains a powerful mythic pattern when he explains about everywhere from Egypt to the mystery religions. The sun god is often depicted as dying and resurrecting, mirroring nature's life cycles. Winter darkness at the winter equinox. A lot of people think that, the reason why we celebrate Christmas the time we do is because on a solar sundial, the sun stops moving. It kind of moves, it stops around the 22nd of December until the 25th. And so then there would be a death of the sun. And then it starts rising again after that. and that would be the resurrection on the sundials, showing that this equinox is is over and starting anew. So they were super big on the circulation of time and the sun and everything else. So it was a big part of their life, and later it became a whole different thing. But at first, that's pretty much all it was. And a lot of the even mythical stories that we read about, like Hercules and everything else, is really just mythologies about the stars, which is pretty crazy because those are in-depth stories. Hall interprets a lot of these stories, though, as symbols of spiritual transformation, representing humanity's own inner renewal and transcendence of the lower self into the higher. So this theme links to what many esoteric schools call the dying and rising savior archetype, like Osiris, Jesus, Mithras, etc. What's funny is, though, Hall points out, when I listened to him, he pointed out that Prometheus showed that man got the spark of God brought to him through disobedience. And so again, like that whole idea with the 6-7 and going through the lower to get to the higher, that's expressed in the story of Prometheus. Goes against the gods to bring us fire, the fire of illumination, to where we could become gods ourselves. That's their interpretation of it. So Egyptians, you have Ra, Osiris, Serapis, which we could look at Serapis in a minute. The Greeks, you have Apollo, Hercules, and Dionysus. In Nordic, you have Baldur, the beautiful, and Odin. And then in American Indian, you have deities like Quetzalcoatl or Texatopoca. And they have solar association. So all of these always have to do with the sun. And so Hall points that this is not that the sun is literally a god, but in physical terms, but that the sun symbolizes the divine principle that is expressed in their life in mystical allegory. So the solar symbolism and ritual mysticism that he points out is alchemy, rituals, and mystical practices. So some of the alchemical symbolism is like gold, that is described as the crystallized sunlight, linking material transformation with spiritual illumination. They've also said that a regular rock sitting with the water will turn into a crystal because of the sun beating down through the water. And they represent intellect with water. So that's why the water rushing over the rock's important with the sun. It's a whole thing, but it's kind of crazy because you do see in physical manifestation things that I could see how they get the allegories that they do. So there's the three sun doctrine. It's the esoteric idea of the spiritual, intellectual, and material sun. That you have an inner sun in three different ways: physical, material, and spiritual. Masonic and religious symbolism as well. He loves to tie Christianity to a lot of this astrotheology. If you're not familiar with astrotheology, it's the idea that everything in the Bible can be explained by looking in the stars. So they were only describing how the stars work. And so it's all an allegory for that, which then just discredits any kind of truth within Christianity and leads it into a pagan philosophy, which is crazy. But one of the most provocative parts, we'll get into it, he describes about Christ, the birth of the darkest time of the year being the light of the world, death and resurrection. It mirrors the cycles, like we talked about earlier. It mirrors the cycles of older pagan myths of the killed and reborn sun god. And this isn't an attack on Christianity, allegedly, from him, but I believe that their sworn enemy is Christianity. So whatever. But he suggests that religions incorporate ancient symbols to express deep truths about the cosmic and inner cycles of the solar system. So, I mean, whatever. So essentially what we're going to be reading about is the sun is a universal archetype representing life, spiritual truth, and divine intelligence. Ancient myths are symbolic, not literal histories, and they reveal psychological and spiritual processes, and solar imagery informs mystical paths. In other words, it expresses transformation and illumination. Different cultures encode the same core principles about the sun to describe the sacred within it. So that's essentially what he gets to take away from it. So it's not going to be a traditional. I mean, I don't know if you guys have read Manly P a whole lot. It's not going to be a traditional, what most people would say when talking about the sun gods, I feel like. So let's get, because it's all an allegory to him. He believes it's an allegory for spiritual illumination or mental illumination of oneself, which is crazy. Pardon me, let me find this here. All right, so the sun, a universal deity. So in Morals and Dogma, he starts off with a excerpt from this. To them, the Aboriginals, the sun was the initiate fire of bodies, the fire of nature, author of life, heat, and ignition. He was to them the efficient cause of all generation, for without him there was no movement, no existence, and no form. He was to them immense, indivisible, and imperishable, and everywhere present. So it was their need of light, of this creative energy, that was felt by all men, and nothing was more fearful to them than his absence. His beneficent influences caused his identification with the principle of good, and the Brahma of the Hindus, the Mithras of the Persians, the Amun and Osiris of the Egyptians, the Bel of the Chaldeans, and the Adonai of the Phoenicians. So in other words, the sun god is everywhere. Greeks became but personifications of the sun. The regeneration principle. Imagine that the fecundity with which perpetuates and rejuvenates the world's existence. So among all nations of antiquity, altars, mounds, and temples were dedicated to the worship of the orb of the day. The ruins of these sacred places yet remain, notable among them being the pyramids of Yucatan in Egypt and the snake mounds of the American Indians, Babylon, Chaldea even, and the round towers of Ireland, the massive rings of uncut stone in Britain and Normandy, and the Tower of Babel, which according to scripture was built so that man might reach up to God, was probably an astronomical observatory, is what Manly P. Hall posits. And many priests and prophets, both pagan and Christian, were versed in astronomy and astrology. Their writings were understood when read in the light of these ancient sciences. With the growth of man's knowledge of the constitution of the periodicity of the heavenly bodies, astronomical principles and terminology were introduced into his religious system. So he's saying astrotheology is all it is. The fixed stars were divided into constellations, and through these constellations wandered the sun and its planets, the latter with their accompanying satellites. So the sun, as supreme among the celestial bodies, visible to the astronomers of antiquity, was assigned to the highest of the gods and became symbolic of the supreme authority of the Creator himself. The tenet of a true triune divinity is not peculiar to Christian or Mosaic theology, but forms a conspicuous part of the dogma of the greatest religions of both ancient and modern times. And we know that the triune is something different to them. The origin of the Trinity is obvious to anyone who will observe the daily manifestations of the sun. The orb, being the symbol of light, has three distinct phases: rising, midday, and setting. The philosophers, therefore, divided the life of all things into three distinct parts: growth, maturity, and decay. So that's the Trinity to them. And between the twilight of the dawn and the twilight of the evening is the high noon of the resplendent glory. God the Father, creator of the world, is symbolized by the dawn. It goes into his colors, symbology. To the Egyptians, the sun was the symbol of immortality, for while it died each night, it rose again with each ensuing dawn. Not only has the sun this diurnal activity, but it also has its annual pilgrimage, during which it passes successfully through the 12 celestial houses of the heavens. So this is where astrology was born. And that's why I think if you believe too much in astrology, like, oh, I can't help it because I'm a Leo or whatever. Yeah, you're just letting this, if the demiurge is real, you're letting them run your life. But the precession of the equinoxes, in which it retrogrades around the zodiac through the 12 signs at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. So that's how they track it. That's called the Great Year Cycle. The Aztec calendar, if you don't know, or the Mayan calendar, if you don't know, when it ended and everybody said the end of the world was coming, it was just starting a new Great Year Cycle at that point. So that's kind of just the origin of like that whole calendar. It's just they were tracking this as well, just like the Egyptians, which is pretty crazy because it's like, okay, so they had the same exact concept of precessions of the sun. That's nuts. And then that gets back to the last episode where we talked about, is it possible that South Americans somehow traversed to Egypt and then they learned from them because it was, according to this teaching, older than Egypt? It's crazy. So the Egyptian sun myth finally centered around the person of a mysterious deity called Serapis. The two Central American deities, Texcoco and Quetzalcoatl, while often associated with the winds, were also undoubtedly solar gods. In Masonry, the sun has many symbols. One expression of the solar deity is Solomon. Solomon is an expression of the sun, whose name Solomon is the name for the supreme light in 3 different languages. Hiram Abiff, the Chiram of the Chaldees, is also a solar deity, and the story of his attack and murder by the Ruffians with its solar interpretation will be found in the chapter Hiram. Okay, it's a different chapter. But that's where they kill Hiram Abiff, and a lot of the killing of the king rituals that you see going on with JFK or Charlie Kirk are done in the same style of the killing and everything else, just like Hiram Abiff. So George Oliver, in his dictionary of symbolical masonry, says this. So we get a symbol from a mason in a Masonic book. The sun rises in the east, and in the east is the place for the worshipful master. As the sun is the source of all light and warmth, so should the worshipful master enliven and warm the brethren of their work. Among the ancient Egyptians, the sun was the symbol of divine providence. Now, here's the thing. Here's the problem I have. I was reading the Bible recently, and in Ezekiel, God literally points out, he said, look, they put their back to the temple and they face towards the east, towards the sun. They face against my temple. They put their backs against me, and they're worshiping the sun. So I just can't help but think this is just, they make it sound great, but just remember that in the Bible, it kind of just totally refutes all this. So I always try to keep that in mind while I read this shit, because it's like, it is the devil's tongue a little bit, you know. I try not to be too dogmatic, but it really is. Let's go. The 3 suns, the solar orb, like the nature of man, was divided by the ancient sages into 3 separate bodies. According to the mystics, there are 3 suns in each solar system, analogous to the 3 centers of the life in each individual constitution. These are called 3 lights: the spiritual sun, intellectual sun, and solar sun. The spiritual sun manifests the power of God, the Father, and the material sun is the vehicle of manifestation for God, the Holy Spirit. Man's nature was divided by the mystics into 3 distinct parts: spirit, soul, and body. His physical body was unfolded and vitalized by the material sun. Spiritual nature was illumined by the spiritual sun, and his intellectual nature redeemed by the true light of grace, the solar sun. And so clearly the intellectual nature, the solar sun you get from that, they put this in italics, the light of grace, the solar sun. So they're saying that that's the true light, is the light of intellect, even though they call that the false light whenever you read in other things. Just keep that in mind. Those who have not attained spiritual consciousness may yet feel his power by an inner faculty, which is called intuition. So in other words, you're born with the intuition, discernment from God, and they can't deny that. So they say, well, you may not have spiritually reached, spiritual consciousness like we say, but yeah, you may have a little bit of that, but you're still not as good as us. So this gets into some weird shit. Christian Rosicrucian scholars have given special appellations to these 3 phases of the sun. The spiritual sun, they call Vulcan. Vulcan which there's a whole bunch of crazy symbolic shit with Vulcan. It's super demonic. The solar and intellectual sun, Christ and Lucifer, respectively, and the material sun, the Jewish demiurge, Jehovah. So the demiurge are Jehovah. You hear? The demiurge, it says right here, the Jewish demiurge is Jehovah. Lucifer here represents the intellectual mind without the illumination of the spiritual body. Therefore, it is the false light. The false light is finally overcome and redeemed by the true light of the soul, called the second logos or Christ. And the secret processes by which the Luciferian intellect is transmuted into the Christly intellect constitute one of the great secrets of alchemy. And it's symbolized by the process of transmuting base metals into gold. That would be like the classic alchemist scientists of the Renaissance times, where we all think it's physical metal. It wasn't. Oh boy. The invisible causes of these effects belong to the spiritual world. Okay, let's move on past that. Oh, man's three bodies are symbolized by an upright triangle, his threefold spiritual nature by an inverted triangle. These two triangles united in the form of a six-pointed star were called by the Jews the Star of David, the signet of Solomon, and are more commonly known today as the Star of Zion. These triangles symbolize the spiritual and material universes linked together in the constitution of human nature, who partakes in both nature and divinity. Man's animal nature partakes of earth, and his divine nature in the heavens. His human nature of the mediator. But isn't that crazy? So we can get a direct link to the Star of David to this. Pretty crazy, if you ask me. Ooh, look at this. Here's a connection to another secret society. Watch this. The Rosicrucians and Illuminati, describing the angels, archangels, and other celestial creatures, declared that they resembled small suns, being centers of radiant energy surrounded by streamers of virilic force, like the Vril Society. From these outpouring streamers of force is derived the popular belief that angels have wings. These wings are corona-like fans of light that these celestial creatures propel themselves through the subtle essence of the superphysical worlds with. Man, that's pretty crazy. So we'll move on past that. It talks about the spheres is the great and most luminous of these spheres is the archangel Michael, and the entire order of the solar life which resemble him and dwell upon the sun are called by modern Christians the archangels, the spirits of light. So he relates this archangels to the stars. It's pretty wild. What else we got here? So Apellius said when describing his initiation, "At midnight I saw a sun shining with a splendid light. The midnight sun was also part of the mystery of alchemy. It symbolized the spirit of man shining through the darkness of his human organisms." So when you hear The Shining, like The Shining, the movie, they're talking about this, the spiritual shining of this illumination. That's what that is. So that I read that earlier today too. It's pretty nuts. Primitive concepts concerning the warfare between the principles of good and evil were often based upon the alterations of day and night. During the Middle Ages, the practices of black magic were confined to the nocturnal hours, and those who served the spirit of evil were called black magicians, while those who served the spirit of God were called white magicians. Black and white were associated respectively with day and night. And he differentiates the two. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but whatever. He's in the camp that this can be good, and this is the real way, but it can be used for bad. The Egyptian demon Typhon was symbolized as part crocodile and part hog because these animals are gross and earthly in both appearance and temperament. Since the world began, living things have feared the darkness, and that's what we talked about in the beginning. And so the worshiping the spirit of darkness, like serpents, is black magician shit. Among the Egyptians, the sun's rays are often shown ending in human hands. Masons will find a connection between these hands and the well-known paw of the lion, which raises all things to life with its grip. And so when they're initiated, they get raised up by the grip of the lion's paw. And that's where that comes from. And that's why Israel just did, what was that? It was called like the lion's I think it literally was the lion's paw operation or something. Showing the connection. Solar colors. The theory so long held of 3 primary and 4 secondary colors is purely exoteric. For since the earliest periods, it has been known that there are 7 colors, not 3 primary colors, the human eye being capable of estimating only 3 of them. Thus, although green can be made by combining blue and yellow, there is also a true primary green, which is not a compound. This can be provoked or proved by breaking up the spectrum with a prism. Helmholtz found this that the so-called secondary colors of the spectrum could not be broken up into their supposed primary colors. Thus, the orange of the spectrum, if passed through a second prism, does not break up into red and yellow, but remains orange. And that's why orange is the Freemasonic color. Consciousness, intelligence, and force are fittingly symbolized by the colors blue, yellow, and red. The therapeutic effects of the colors, moreover, are in harmony with this concept, for blue is a fine, soothing electrical color, yellow a vitalizing and refining color, and red an agitating and heat-giving color. It has also been demonstrated that minerals and plants affect the human constitution according to their colors. Thus, a yellow flower generally yields a medicine that affects the constitution in a manner similar to yellow light or the musical tone mi. Isn't that crazy? So they're connecting the frequencies to the colors, to the sounds, all of it. This is how you get into this idea of them controlling people with frequencies. When they go this deep on the idea of like, this color is on the spectrum for this, and this is on the spectrum of the musical spectrum here. You know, it's deep shit. Let's get past that. All right. The ancients conceived the spirit of man to correspond with the color blue, the mind with yellow, and the body with red. So the mind and body, McDonald's, yellow and red. The mind is yellow and the body is red. You don't see blue anywhere, do you? Heaven is therefore blue, earthly yellow, and hell red. So earthly and hellish are the two things that McDonald's colors represent. The fiery conditions of the inferno merely symbolizes the nature of the sphere or plane of force of which it is composed. By the way, there's like one place that is blue, and it's Culver's. That's like the only place. And it happens to be the most healthy of all fast food places. Not to say any are healthy, but I'm saying if you were to pick one, I'm thinking like statistically, I think I've read that it is the healthiest. And at least it has a blue symbol. Just saying. The rest are red and white and yellow. In the Greek mysteries, the irrational spheres were always considered as red, for it represented that condition in which the consciousness is enslaved by the lusts and passions of the lower nature. In India, certain gods, usually attributes of Vishnu, are depicted with blue skin to signify their divine and supramundane constitution. According to the esoteric philosophy, blue is the true and sacred color of the sun, and the apparent orange-yellow shade is the orb of which is the result of its rays being immersed in the substance of this illusionary world. The red and yellow, material and hell. In the original symbolism of the Christian church, colors were of first importance, and their use was regulated according to the carefully prepared rules. Since the Middle Ages, however, the carelessness with which colors have been employed has resulted in the loss of their deeper emblematic meanings. But they use them now, don't they, with all these corporations? The black magicians know how to use them. The black magicians didn't forget about any of the stuff he's teaching. I'll say that. If this is real, the white and black magician shit, then yeah. So, in its primary aspect, white and silver signify life, purity, innocence, joy, and light. Red, the suffering and death of Christ and his saints, and also divine love, blood, and warfare. Blue, the heavenly sphere and the states of godliness and contemplation. Yellow or gold, glory, fruitfulness, and goodness. Green, fecundity, youthfulness, and prosperity. And violet, humility, deep affection, and sorrow. Black, death, resurrection, and humiliation. In early church art, the colors of robes and ornaments also revealed whether a saint had been martyred, as well as the character of the work that had been done to deserve canonization. So they would put you would know by the colors in the paintings of these, like what was going on if you were a Mason or old school Christian, I guess. In addition to the color of the spectrum, there are a vast number of vibrationary color waves, some too low and others too high to be registered by the human optical apparatus. It is appalling to contemplate man's colossal ignorance concerning this vistas of abstract space. And we talk about that a lot, right? Like, not us, but in general, in our population nowadays, about how we can only see 5% of the light spectrum, essentially. So this gets into that. As in the past, man's explored unknown continents. So in the future, armed with curious implements fashioned for purpose, he will explore these little known fastnesses of light, color, sound, and consciousness. And that's going on right now. That is going on right now. So Osiris is represented by, the sun's represented by Osiris, rather. And so across the world, you will find, let's find here. Okay. So Osiris is a green man, emerald green, kind of like Thoth. When he comes, he brings the emerald tablets. Well, that's why, because it's related to Osiris and this whole Osirian story. According to the Egyptian legend, the goddess Nut, in spite of the curse of sterility pronounced upon her by Ra, is able to bear Osiris thanks to the help of the god Thoth, who sidestepped the judgment by inventing 5 extra days in the year. Osiris is conceived during this period. Assisted by Isis, his sister, Osiris gives humans respect for the gods. If you remember the last one, we talked about how they added 5 days to the year. Well, there you go. And this kind of goes into the stuff we just talked about Isis in the last episode. So Osiris gives humans respect for the gods, instruction in agriculture, and in the order of the universe. As a symbol of continuity, this god, beloved to the people of the Nile, becomes the object of tenacious jealousy by his brother Seth. So this gets into the whole story about him killing him and Isis collecting the fragments to create Horus, reincarnated Osiris. So this green man can be found, the green man, Osiris, can be found other places like in Britain at this Rosslyn Chapel. They call it the green man, but it's a little different. So they switch it up a little. Same deal though. But the reason why they worship trees in the Celtic stuff, if you know about Celtic, how they worship the trees instead of the planets. The reason why is because, trees die too and they resurrect just like the sun. So it's this idea of the leaves fall, but they still come back. So they started using them as another death and rebirth symbol. And so that's why the evergreen tree, represented with Nimrod, right? And Christmas, it never goes away. It's kind of the promise that what's to come back, right? It never dies. So it shows that, okay, well, that's alive still. So all these other trees that are dead will come back. It's like this promise of life later. So that's pretty deep, crazy shit. Also, they talk about the scarab. I'm sure you've seen in Egypt, the scarab, the beetle that they have with the sun. So the scarab, whenever it lays its eggs, it puts it inside of mud or dung. And what it does is it rolls it up a hill and then it pushes it down the hill. And it rolls it back with its hind legs. It walks backwards up the hill, pushing the dung or mud up the hill. And then it rolls it down and keeps doing it over and over until it molds a perfect little marble of dung or mud. And it's it's rounded and polished by the roughness of the earth as it rolls up and down. And so the Egyptians looked at this and they thought, this is like the sun, where they thought it rolled it all the way to the Nile where it let the life out. It's a whole analogy, but essentially, when you look at the dung going up and down above the, on the hills, it looks like the sun every day, and it goes up and down and the life comes out of it later after it gets polished perfectly. And so this beetle also is able to fly, and it looks like a beetle of the earth, like it can't fly until all of a sudden it just takes off with its wings, showing this idea of like everlasting life. So this beetle ended up being a whole emblem for the sun of everlasting life, death and rebirth. That's why you see the scarab everywhere in Egypt. It's pretty deep and crazy, but they really would look at nature and study it and apply these analogies that very deep, very, very deep. But that's why the trees being represented in the same way, it's the same kind of concept of just symbology, deep symbology. Pretty crazy shit. So the sun god, Mithras, you've got the sun god Mithras as well, Adonis. It's in like everything. Most of all the astrology that comes out of it is all based off the sun pantheon. And we can get into some of the zodiac stuff, which is the next chapter. Talks about how the Egyptians were honored with a special appellation because of their proficiency in computing the power of motion of the heavenly bodies and their effect upon the destinies on individuals. So they understood that people were affected by it. And again, I don't know how much I give myself over to this, but you can if you want, Here I'm sharing still, so I'll go ahead and stop. The pagans looked upon the stars as living things capable of influencing the destinies of individuals, nations, and races. The early Jewish patriarchs believed that the celestial bodies participated in the affairs of men is evident to any student of biblical literature. The book of Judges, they fought from heaven because even the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. This is a quote he gave to prove that. The word zodiac is derived from the Greek zodiakos, which means a circle of animals, or as some believe, little animals. This would be why the Egyptian gods are half animal, half man. It is the name given by the old pagan astronomers to a band of fixed stars about 16 degrees wide, apparently encircling the earth. It states that the Greek word zodiakos comes from zoon, meaning an animal. Robert Hewitt Brown adds, this latter word is compounded directly from the primitive Egyptian radicals, zo, life, and on, a being. So life and a being. The Greeks later, other people influenced by their culture, divided band of zodiacs into 12 sections, each being 16 degrees in width and 30 degrees in length. He gets deep on this. The popular theory concerning the origin of zodiacal creatures to the effect that they are products of the imagination of shepherds who, watching their flocks at night, occupied their minds by tracing the forms of animals and birds in the heavens. This theory is untenable unless the shepherds be regarded as the shepherd priests of antiquity. It is unlikely that the zodiacal signs were derived from the star groups which they now represent. It is far more probable that the creatures assigned to the 12 houses are symbolic of the qualities and intensity of the sun's power, which occupy different parts of the zodiacal belt. I don't know what the fuck. He gets real deep on that. So among the ancients, the sun was always symbolized by the figure and nature of the constellation through which it passed at the vernal equinox. So for nearly the past 2,000 years, the sun has crossed the equator at the vernal equinox in Pisces. He's going into this great year cycle precession. And, people say it's the age of Aquarius. That's kind of what he's talking about. The age of Aquarius, the age of Pisces. The sun goes through all these vernal equinoxes. So Albert Pike describes the reverence for which Persians felt for this sign, the sign of Taurus, being the sign of the sun at their time. The method of astrological symbolism in vogue among them. In Zoroaster's cave of initiation, the sun and planets were represented overhead in gem and gold. And also the zodiac. The sun appeared emerging from the back of Taurus. In the constellation of the bull are also to be found the seven sisters. The sacred Pleiades, famous to Freemasonry as the seven stars at the upper end of the sacred ladder. So in ancient Egypt, it was during this period when the vernal equinox was in the sign of Taurus. So it keeps going, and now it's in the sign of Aquarius today. That's pretty nuts. So you have the scarab that we talked about also represents Cancer, the crab. So that would have been the Egyptians maybe were during the time of Cancer. He kind of gets into that. The word fish is, he kind of talks about how Jesus was Pisces because the word fish is an abbreviation of this whole title, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. St. Augustine expresses, if you join together the initial letters of the 5 Greek words, which mean Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, they will make fish. Wow. So this guy's saying if you take 5 Greek words, the first letter of 5 Greek words, which all these words mean, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, they will make the abbreviation into fish. So that's crazy. That's like old school conspiracy, like back in the primitive days. You know what I mean? Like they're really stretching. That's crazy. So there's something called heliocentric and geocentric astrology. So the heliocentric is where the sun is the center of the solar system and it naturally belongs there. But back in the day, they believed in the geocentric. So a lot of people would be worshiping the time of Taurus when in reality it was Scorpio. And only the like initiates of the mystery school knew. And so they would do things like it says here. It is important to be remembered when the sun was said to be in the certain sign of zodiac, the ancients really meant that the sign occupied the opposite sign and cast its long ray into the house in which it enthroned it. Therefore, it is said that when the sun is in Taurus, it means that the sun is in the sign opposite to Taurus, which is Scorpio. This resulted in 2 distinct schools of philosophy, the geocentric, exoteric, and the heliocentric, the esoteric. The ignorant multitudes worship the house of the sun's reflection, which would be the bull, and the wise revered the sun's actual dwelling, which would be the scorpion. Or the serpent. So the symbol of the concealed spiritual mystery. This sign had 3 different symbols. The most common is that of the scorpion, who was called by the ancients the backbiter. Being the symbol of deceit and perversion, the second form of the sign is the serpent, often used by the ancients to symbolize wisdom. But the rarest form of the scorpion is that of an eagle. And this is why Quetzalcoatl is a chicken snake god, right? The eagle and the snake. It's really an eagle and a snake. And it's because it's the blend of that. It's this idea of as above, so below. And pretty crazy. The most common is that, yep. The arrangement of the stars of the constellation bears as much resemblance to a flying bird as to a scorpion. Scorpio being the sign of occult initiation. And the flying eagle, the king of the birds, represents the highest and most spiritual type of Scorpio. In other words, an enlightened scorpion would be an eagle. It's pretty wild. So that's pretty crazy. When Aquarian age is thoroughly established, the sun will be in Leo. So right now, the sun is in Leo. As will be noted from the explanation previously given in the chapter regarding the distinction between geocentric and heliocentric astrology, then indeed will the secret religions of the world include once more the raising initiation by the grip of the lion's paw. Aquarius has been established. The grip of the lion's paw has been done. Didn't Israel call it the grip of the lion's paw? I'm almost positive they did. We're like there. I mean, that's crazy. Let's see here. Israel mission. Let's see here. We'll find out. Ooh. Okay, here. Let's pull it up. Let's find out. Huh, that's crazy. So, like he said, he pretty much predicted the future, saying that Lazarus, the resurrection of man, will be whenever the Leo comes back, which is now. We're in the sign of Aquarius. It's really Leo. It's crazy. So the expression is borrowed. Yeah. Strong grip of the lion's paw. Rosicrucian. Wow. A correspondent wishes to know what determines the time of Easter each year, and being a Freemason, he also wishes to know what connection there is between the resurrection of Christ and Easter, and the resurrection of Hiram Abiff in the Masonic symbology. Wow. We will continue the subject with another article dealing with an initiation and called Freemasonry and Catholicism, and other and those are wow, this is crazy. And those articles, the subject mentioned by our correspondent, will be thoroughly ventilated. In the meanwhile, we will briefly outline the Masonic legend, which is necessary to know in order to understand the subject referred to. Wow. So the Masonic legend says that in the beginning, Jehovah created Eve, and the Lucifer spirit Samael united with her. And from this union, Canaan was born. Wow, they believe this. This union, Cain was born. Then Samael left Eve, and she became virtually a widow. And Cain has the son of a widow, and from him descended all the craftsmen of the world, including Hiram Abiff and Grandmaster Workman on Solomon's temple. Dude, holy shit. So this whole idea of the seed wars comes from Masonry. This whole seed war thing is a Freemasonic theory. Wow. That doesn't mean it's not true, but that's crazy. So high mystic Masons recognize the fact that from cosmic view, Hiram Abiff is symbolized by the sun, while the sun, Hiram, is in the northern signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. He is among faithful friends and followers, but when in the course of the year he enters through Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, he's assaulted by 3 conspirators. As recorded in the Masonic legend, and finally slain at the winter solstice, he again resurrects. Yeah, that's the whole thing we just talked about. That's the sun story. So we're getting into area. Okay. I'm just curious about this. This is crazy. By this initiation, he was so they're talking about, okay, here we go. Lion's paw. Hiram, the son of Cain, must also be raised to a higher degree of initiation, and only the sun spirit about to soar into the heavens could accomplish the feat. Hiram was reborn as Lazarus and raised by the strong grip of the lion's paw. Lazarus comes from the Bible, dude. He had been a leader of the craftsmen during the regime of Jehovah and his creature Solomon. By this initiation, he was raised up for the purpose of being a leader in the kingdom of Christ and helping the same people on in a higher phase of their evolution. Therefore, he became a Christian, charged to explain the mysteries of the cross. And as a symbol of this mystery, the rose was added thereto. This mission was embodied in this symbolic name, Christian Rosenkreuz. So this is how Rosicrucianism got made, huh? Holy shit. The rose is called the emblem of the mystery, but most people are not aware that this addition of the rose of the cross was the origin of the symbolic significance. The rose is the emblem of the mystery of the cross because it explains the path of chastity, the transmutation of blood from passion to love. Wow. And Lazarus, therefore, became Christian Rose Cross. So Lazarus became the Rosicrucians, his doctrine. Wow. So the Rosicrucians are the special messengers of Christ, of the sons of Cain, as Jesus is to the sons of Abel. Ah, okay. So Lazarus is the Christ to the sons of Cain. The Pharisees knew a great deal of the occult origin of these two classes of humanity, and therefore the Lazarus miracle was to them the crowning crime of Christ. They became seriously alarmed then that their national religion would be superseded by another if any more such signs were performed, for they sensed that it was an initiation of a higher nature than they knew of, and that it aboded an entrance into a higher cycle. Before the Christ, all the religions were race religions, suited to the people of whom they were given, and suitably only for those people. And these religions were Jehovah religions, for as the Father was the highest initiate of the Saturn period. Okay. Wow. So from Jehovah then come the race religions, which endeavor to prepare mankind along the path of evolution by means of law. These race religions are to be superseded by the universal religion of the Son, Spirit, Christ. So these, so they, okay, so he's saying that they killed Jesus because they were worried about the Son religion being spread. So then they went back to the race religions, and they're saying that they've covered up the truth with race religions. And we might be fighting over race religions when in reality, this could be true. Probably not, though. So the rule and present use for the determination of the time of Easter is that it falls on the first Sunday following the Paschal full moon. Did you guys know that? This was the original time adopted by the earliest Christians, who had known knowledge of and regard for the occult significance. But very soon, ignorant people started schisms and fixed it at different times. This occasioned no little controversy. In the 2nd century, a dispute rose on this point between the Eastern and Western churches. So Eastern churches celebrated Easter on the 14th day of the first Jewish month or moon, considered to be the equivalent of Jewish Passover. Western kept it in the Sunday after the 14th day, holding it to the commemoration of the resurrection of Jesus. The First Council of Nicaea decided in favor of the Western use, branding the Eastern practice with the name of heresy. This, however, only settled the point that Easter was astronomically cycle for... they just secured it into paganism. Wow. So this says all the founders of race religions, Hermes, Buddha, Moses, etc., were initiates in the Jehovistic mysteries. They were sons of Seth. At their initiation, they became ensouled by their particular race spirit, and their spirit, speaking through the mouth of each initiate, gave the laws to its people. Wow. Moses, the laws of Menu, the noble truths of Buddha. These laws manifested sin because the people did not and could not keep them at their stage of evolution. So they made a certain debt of destiny in consequence. This is deep. Wow. And we'll have to break this down sometime. This is pretty crazy. Could this be the priestcraft from which Jehovah drew his representatives? The prophets and founders of religion and spiritual temple builders are the sons of Seth. The sons of Cain still feel in their breasts the divine nature of their ancestor. They repudiate the indirect method of salvation by... This is on the Rosicrucian Fellowship. This is crazy. So it's almost like they're saying that the Rosicrucians are the true way and that Freemasonry and all that shit isn't. Wow. Perfecting themselves in the arts and crafts, building the temple of material civilization, industry, craft, according to the plan of God, the grand architect of the universe, Christ being the chief cornerstone. Oh, no, yeah, never mind. Never mind. In time, however, these two great streams of sons of Seth and Cain must unite in order to reach the portals of the kingdom of Christ. Holy shit, this is worth a deep dive. What are they saying? Sons of Seth and sons of Cain are separate? Oh, duh, they are. Yeah, it's I knew that. That's that's the whole, because Seth is the child of Adam after Abel was killed. So they have to unite in order to reach the portals of the kingdom of Christ. Before his time, there's no way in which such an amalgamation may take place. So Solomon was reborn as Jesus, into whom the Christ Spirit entered, and the baptism. Yeah. What do you guys think about that? Is that crazy shit or what? Probably. I think it is. Whatever. That's just a little bit of a weird one for me, but hey, whatever. Just this is what it's like for me when I'm studying. I'm just getting into it, checking shit out. Pretty nuts. So the grip of the lion's paw, represented by the sun, being born again. Didn't find anything from Israel, but oh shit. But I bet you we will. Watch this shit. Operation Rising Lion, there it is. Rising Lion was a significant military operation by Israel targeting Iranian nuclear... Yeah, that's the Iranian shit. The operation aimed to counter the Iranian threat of Israel's survival. That's so funny. It's for our survival. We know better. Cake in a cup. What do you think? Shit's pretty nuts. It's pretty on point, I think. Something to it. Good shit. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. It's just a little bit of a Manly P Hall deep dive. I think we're gonna switch it up. We gotta get into that Dark Majesty book. There's just too much good shit. I think we're gonna switch that up. I don't know, maybe not next week, maybe we'll see. All right, cool. Well, we're gonna be fucking back next week. I'm just super busy. I'm working like crazy double shift hours. So bear with me. We'll be hammering hard on the content again here soon. We're doing a couple episodes a week for now, but we'll be getting back at it. So bear with me, guys. Hopefully you enjoy what I give you for now. And got some pretty fire episodes coming up. I'm gonna do a Christmas deep dive. Got a Christmas deep dive coming up. TNT, damn, showed up right at the last minute. That's okay though. You can go back and listen. Yeah, but we're getting Nephilim Clown deep dive and Christmas deep dive this week coming up, and we'll do a book club. I'll try to do 3 episodes this week. We'll see. Like I said, I'm working crazy hours, but for now, if you want to give love to the show, give us some love, go support us in any way you can. You can subscribe to the show, like, follow, share, all that good shit. So thank you. Be back next week. Thank you.